Hey there, it's Brent Barnes, and currently I'm overcoming a fear of recording in public. I'm back at my alma mater. I officially graduated a year and 13 days ago. It's almost the new year. I was recollecting on my collegiate experiences. This one came across my mind. I was extremely proud of it, and as I started to write the script, general outline for this video, I realized that I was actually extremely proud of it, and it brought back a lot of memories that I think I can reapply to 2019. This is the story about how I broke the rules and ended up getting a B in a 400 level literature class in college. In this literature class, we were studying 3 different authors: Flannery O'Connor, William Styron, and Walker Percy. These 3 people approached God and religion from very different ways. O'Connor was straight up trying to convert people to Christianity. William Styron was basically trying to figure out his muddy, slippery slope of a life. And Walker Percy ended up actually finding the middle ground between the 2 people, and he kind of glued the 2 extremes together for us. This class caused its students to think deeply about God and religion. Thus, I called it my existential literature class, even though that definitely wasn't the name. I forgot what the actual name of the class was. I'm sweating because people are walking by, but it's like a day in December, and I'm nervous. This is weird. I don't like this. So the final paper of the semester was coming up, and we had to figure out what the heck these authors were trying to say about God. Instead of procrastinating, I thought that I would get ahead and allocate days to different tasks on the paper. Needing 15 resources, I allocated a whole day to just collecting the resources. I was successful with that. The next day or 2, I allocated to reading and collecting information from those sources. And that's where everything went absolutely wrong. I remember moseying on over to do call over here, sitting up in that window right about there. I can't get in. Sitting in one of the fancy chairs. Can you see those fancy chairs? Can you see the chairs? I opened my laptop. I opened the folder that held all of my research articles. I opened the first research article, and I remember being slapped in the face so hard, because right then, when my heart dropped, I could feel it sinking like bricks bound in a bag, thrown in the ocean, that I wasn't gonna write this paper, that I couldn't write this paper. I've had plenty of experience with physical and mental pain and, gritting through all of that stuff, but I knew this was different. It was so immediate. It wasn't a decision. I could feel the sympathetic nervous system switch turn on. My fight or flight kicked in, and I freaking flew away. But this feeling didn't feel like I was running from anything. Instead, it felt like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. Well, he was trying to run. It feels different. It feels like a bear had just walked up to me in camp. That bear is right there in my face, and I don't even feel like running. I just know, like, I'm gonna get swallowed whole. There's no use in trying to fight. There's no use in trying to run. It was like a Dementor had sucked the life and all of the hope that I had about this assignment and my entire, college career. I couldn't stand to sit down and read through all of this academic crap. I gotta get a few things straight first. I really liked and appreciated this class. This was actually a class that I looked forward to going to every day. The professor was this nice older lady who never lost her spunk. She would never be afraid to tell you, hey, you look peaky, you look peakish today. You should go home. Why are you here? She wasn't afraid to kick you out of the class because you hadn't done the reading. She let you know the truth and exactly what she was thinking at the time. She assigned a lot of reading. We had to study those 3 authors, and each of them had 2 or 3 books that we had to read, but it was easy to see how those texts and those books were relevant to my life. It was also easy to see how those authors were relevant to one another. I liked the circle of desks that actually encouraged discussion. I really liked the friendly disagreements that we could have about such important topics. Now that I look back on it, I can tell that this class put me in the optimal zone for development. It challenged me to the point where it was interesting, but it wasn't so hard that I was anxious, and it wasn't so easy that I was bored. Now this should lead you to believe that then you should enjoy doing that, right? However, at this time, outside of school, in real life, in my apartment, in my room, laying in bed, I was in such an existential rut that I couldn't get out of. I had no idea what my purpose was or why it even mattered that I existed. These bigger questions were really on my mind, not the ones that my professors were asking me to solve. Why I like this class, this one little hiccup in Duke in that fancy chair caused me to implode so hard that I had to question what I was doing, because I knew that I couldn't get past that point. I knew this paper wasn't gonna get done, and I had to figure out why. It wasn't long after that moment that I got mad. I'm not a mad person, but I got really, really mad. This assignment was so arbitrary to my life. Like, why was it important? As an English major, I was so sick of taking one book and two books and like the landscapes and different pieces of fiction and trying to figure out what they represent conceptually. Like, who freaking cares about that stuff? I mean, I find that stuff interesting now, but only because it's like a good problem to have. But at that point in my life, I needed to figure other stuff out. What they were asking me to do was irrelevant. And I knew this teacher really cared genuinely about her students and the growth of her students. However, what she was asking me to do in this assignment that was for everybody in the whole class, I knew it wouldn't help me. And so that's when I had to decide whether I would play the game and write the paper as it was supposed to be written, or respectfully take a risk and sacrifice the idea of my grade. Eventually, after I was done at Duke having a meltdown, I got angry and I came to this building right here, Carrier Library. I stomped inside, got myself some coffee to accompany me on this journey. I went up the stairs all the way to the third floor where it was absolutely quiet, set my stuff up this time, sat down, got my thoughts straight for a little bit, wielded my anger like a sword on fire, and I tore up my word processor. I wrote a disclaimer, but you never write a disclaimer in an academic paper, and it was like, I'm so sorry for what I'm about to do, and I fully know that this is exactly the opposite of what you wanted, but I'm gonna do it anyway, because I have to. My goal in this paper was to use the existential concepts presented by these two authors, Styron and Percy, and say that based on the things that they're trying to say, writing this paper would be the worst thing that I could possibly actually do. Because if I did, then I would be dead while alive. If there is a God, or if there isn't a God, that would be the biggest sin, is to do whatever makes you dead while alive. The minimum page count was 10 pages. Mine ended up being 10 and some change. I don't know if I cared about the page count. I honestly might have. But the one thing I remember is that I was shaking for every single page that I wrote, the whole time through. Like, it never got old. I felt supercharged by life. I felt so excited to be there. I was hidden away in this quiet part of the library amongst this vast campus of 20,000 people, like uprooting the foundations of academia. I was committing academic blasphemy. I was questioning my education, really learning something. I never had that much fun doing school. I edited it a little bit as I wrote it just to make sure that the sentences weren't completely unreadable. Other than that, I didn't edit it at all. I still had a day or two before it was actually due. I think I read through it like one time as soon as I finished writing it. I think I put a period where a question mark should have gone. I think I used the wrong version of 2. I put 1 O instead of 2 O's. I used flowery language way more than I should have because I was just bad. I used parentheses for unnecessary colloquial places in my paper, like crappy asides, like just giving straight attitude. I didn't reference a single like specific line of text at all throughout the whole thing. I never used quotations besides ironic quotations. I saved it, I printed it, and I turned it in immediately without looking back. I didn't feel like editing it to perfection because it had already captured the aliveness that I felt for the 3 hours that it took to write that paper. It captured the anger that I felt with my education thus far. However, I walked that fine line between, wow, I really appreciate these books and everything I've learned from them, but I also played the other side, that it was contradictory if I spent too much time searching through this book for an exact quote for hours. So appreciation without wasting my time. Every day that we had class before I got my paper back, I was so worried that this professor I respected would come in and look at me different, like someone she might have liked a little bit before I had betrayed her. But the look never came, and one day she brought in a stack of papers. Before I even got the paper back, she told me that I got a B. In that moment, I was so ecstatic. The risk that I took paid off. I forgot how it all happened, but the other students looked at me and said, "What did you do?" And she told them that instead of writing a paper, I wrote a manifesto. I had no idea what a manifesto is. And to be honest, I still don't know what a manifesto is, but I guess I wrote one. I didn't want to brag too much, but somehow I snuck it in humbly that I didn't use any sources. I didn't do any research. I didn't have any direct quotes from the books. That's when this girl looked at me and she said, "Oh man, I wish I didn't have to use any sources." And I was like, "Oh my, what do you mean? What? Like, yeah, duh. Don't we all wish we didn't have to use sources?" It's like she didn't tell me, "Hey, Brent, you don't have to use sources. You're the only student that doesn't have to use sources." I hate to toot my own horn, but I was the only one willing to take the risk, to call the bluff. Nobody wants to use sources unless they want to use sources, as redundant as that sounds. People are only going to use sources to convey the meaning that they want to convey if they really care enough about the subject to convey what they want to convey. But because we hate it so much, nobody gives a crap enough to want to do that. Before I shot this video, I went back and reread that paper because I cared enough about it to convey what it meant to me. In those situations, it matters to take notes, to go look for exact quotes. But in 90% of the other areas, it just doesn't matter. I was just mad. I wasn't mad at the individuals in my class that said, "Oh man, I wish I could have gotten what you got and like done, less work like you did." I was really mad that the education system hadn't taught them how to think. There are 20,000 kids on this campus. Are they really being taught to think for themselves? Or for something else, for a grade, for a job? I just find it sad because there are a lot of students in high schools right now that I've talked to as a substitute teacher, and I feel that their grades are equated to their worth as a person. Because they don't have that mindset of questioning everything and thinking that it's okay to question things in a respectful way, in a way that they have to earn it, that there's no other option in their education. Since this was my second to last semester of my college career, I got to apply these same principles to other classes that I took as well. I tried to have as much possible fun as I could with each of these papers without letting it consume too much of my time. I basically make sure that I understood the concept and then just go. I wrote 5 pages for a 2-page paper, and then maybe I had to write it again. I wrote them super quick, and it only took me like 2 hours to write this paper or something like that twice. And I ended up with something that was funny, and it also proved that I understood the concepts. My only goal was to entertain the professor who had to read like 100 other papers from every kid in that lecture hall. And then in Viking literature, which was an English class, the professor wanted us to write 30-page commonplace books. We had to do 2 or 3 of these, which meant about 90 pages of writing for the whole semester. The rest of the students were up in arms. She said specifically that it didn't have to be formal writing. And so I took that and I ran with it. For my Existential B paper that we've been talking about this whole time, it took me 3 hours to write 10 pages. That meant if I gave myself a day to write 10 pages, that would take 3 days to write a commonplace book. What did I do? I made sure I read all of the stuff that I had to read for this Viking literature class, which was a good bit. I took interest in it. Viking literature, 70-year-olds killing 30-year-old men. It's like interesting, it's funny. And then I had thoughts, and instead of thinking about it for like 10 hours beforehand, I basically just improv wrote all of the things that I was thinking through. I just thought through them out loud. Before I knew it, 3 hours later, I had 10 pages. And it was super easy, and I didn't even edit it. I just turned it in. Even though it didn't have perfect grammatical construction or punctuation, I wrote it like I cared about the subject. Therefore, I deserved to flaunt what I knew and have fun with the ideas and thoughts that were in my head. I ended up getting a pretty low grade at first. I got a C on my first 30-page paper. She said it had to be a little bit more formal than that. I just took a little bit more time the next time around. But I was getting so much experience from just writing a bunch that all of my grammar got better, my punctuation got better as a result of just writing, without that burden of the stress of just being perfect all the time. So to do this method, you have to first care about what you're doing. You have to read the materials, you have to earn the lackadaisical approach to writing. And then you have to just have fun while you write, and maybe just Improvise as you go. Be afraid of improvisation. That's what writing is. Expressing your thoughts in a linear fashion. If you write a paper with your thoughts perfect, a lot of the times you're gonna lose your readers because you've already perfected it. But if you take them along on your thought process, they get to that conclusion alongside of you. And a lot of the times it can be a much more fun way and a much more effective way of writing. And that makes it more fun and effective for the reader too. Before I finally wrap up this video, I need to say one thing about rules. Rules are not bad at all. Teachers are the ones that give out the rules. However, there's a two-part relationship that happens between the teacher and the student. If there were no teacher, then everybody, all of the students, they would be treading water in this vast ocean that has no direction inherently built in for you. We're supposed to have a guide, and that guide is teacher. If we didn't have that, we would be paralyzed by analysis. We would have too many options. So we have to realize that in a classroom full of students, that a teacher has to make a set of rules and has to lay railroad tracks for 15 to 100 to 200 students all at one time. They can't individualize that course to one student. So I completely understand that this professor couldn't tailor the entire course to me. To curse that professor for my experience in this class would be wrong. She laid the groundwork. She gave me the text to read, but that order that she imposed on me and that my entire experience put on me up to that moment was too stifling. That's when the student has to come in and say, thank you for laying those linear railroad tracks for me to generally follow, but I have to take a detour. I have to go follow this path. That place in the forest over there, that looks interesting. I'm gonna go over there. I'm gonna explore that. While the teacher gives us order, the student sometimes needs to break that order and create chaos to make things interesting, or else the soul, it just dies. This isn't a video that's meant to tell you to go out, break all the rules. You have to earn the breaking of those rules. You have to respect the fact that teachers are there to give us order. And if we didn't have that order, then we can never find land in this vast sea of nothingness. In this life, would you rather sacrifice your grade, or would you rather sacrifice your soul? Maybe let's try to be like this guy and write whatever paper we want. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Have a good day.